Hey everyone, this is Rob, and today is Black Friday, which means that the holiday shopping season has begun in earnest, and it's a great time for me to put up a video with some advice on buying that perfect television for your PlayStation 4 Pro. Now, if you're like me, you've probably been holding off on buying a 4K television, mostly because there hasn't been any content. There was no reason to own a 4K television, in my opinion, until this year. If you bought a 4K television 1 or 2 years ago, you really weren't doing anything but upscaling HD content up to 4K, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It might make it look a little bit better, but it really doesn't do a whole lot. It's like having a color television set when everybody's broadcasting in black and white. And to some effect, that's still happening now. There's, to my knowledge, there's nobody broadcasting in 4K over the airwaves, and I don't even think there are 4K channels yet. But the catalyst to buying a 4K television for me, at least this year, was the PlayStation 4 Pro. The PlayStation 4 Pro outputs, if you're watching this video, you probably know this, it outputs 4K video, and it has support for HDR. And to be fair, the PlayStation 4, the normal PlayStation 4, the Slim now, is what it's called, the PlayStation 4 Slim, also supports HDR because it's got a firmware update that allows it to process HDR content. So let me break those two things down real quick before I give you my recommendation, which you probably know by the title. But anyway, 4K has to do with the resolution of TV. How many pixels are on the screen? They have to remember the more pixels that you have on a screen, the higher the fidelity. There's more, you can get a better resolution. Just think about if you had a 16 by 16 grid and I told you to draw a circle, how blocky that would look. And then if I gave you 1,000 by 1,000 grid and I told you to draw a circle by filling in the squares, how smooth that would look. And if I gave you 1,000,000 by 1,000,000 and you draw a circle, it's going to look even smoother until your eye can't even tell the difference. So when we go up to a higher resolution, we make everything sharper, the images are sharper, and everything looks more lifelike and realistic. So with that said, 4K is a natural progression of HD. It went from standard definition, which was 480. When we had, I remember getting progressive televisions televisions supported 480p, which is 40 lines of resolution vertically with a progressive image. I don't want to even get into progressive and interlaced. It's not important for this video. But it went from 480 to 720 and 1080, which came out about the same time. There's 1080i and 1080p, interlaced and progressive again. Don't need to know about that. They're both 1080 pixels high. And then the natural progression is 2160, which is double 1080, which for whatever reason they're calling 4K, even though it's 2K vertically. I guess the 4K comes from it being horizontal. It's not even really 4K. If you look here, it shows what the television is currently running at. This is a PlayStation 4 Pro. On the video, it's just detailing what it's running at. It's running at 3840 by 2160, which is essentially double 1080 by 1920, which is the normal amount of pixels that you would get at HD content. So this is just the next progression, and I think it's really going to be around a while. What is new this year is the HDR content, which is high dynamic range. What does that mean? Sounds like it's more jargon, right? More mumbo jumbo. High dynamic range has to do with the colors that are displayed on the television. If you have more colors, think about drawing a rose with a box of 8 Crayola crayons versus drawing a rose with a box of 64, right? You can get more deeper shades of red, you can get shadows in there, everything looks more lifelike and it looks more vibrant and brilliant. Same thing, you have a color gamut, the number of colors that your TV is capable of displaying. When you have a standard definition, when you have an SDR, when you run an SDR, the standard dynamic range, you have this many colors to work with. When you have high dynamic range, you have more colors to work with, which means that you can display things that are more lifelike. Sunsets look more brilliant. You don't lose as much detail in the shadows of images. Like if you're looking at a scene where there's a forest, and the sun is shining through and there's a lot of shadows, you might lose that detail if you don't have the ability to display all the colors. So it isn't necessarily more colors, it's more vibrant colors. Just think about HDR as having a better box of Crayolas versus a shittier box of Crayolas. So it has nothing to do with the resolution, that's a separate thing. So you have 4K and HDR separate. And again, until this year, there were no 4K televisions, to my knowledge, that supported HDR. So I didn't even know what HDR was until the Xbox One S came out. and that was over the summer, and they started supporting HDR for their games. Again, the resolution didn't go up, but it started supporting this, the extra colors. And when the PlayStation 4 Pro was announced, not only does it support HDR, but it also supports a higher resolution. Now, it does some kind of trickery. I don't really want to get into how the PlayStation 4 is outputting 4K. It doesn't, for most games, it's not going to render 4K natural or natively. It's going to render a lower resolution image and upscale it to 4K, but it's going to do it in such a way that's optimized for gaming, and it'll look better. It's going to look better than if you don't use 4K. So if you want to take advantage of that new PlayStation 4 Pro, you need a television that is 4K and supports HDR. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have a 1080p television that you can't enjoy the benefits of the PlayStation 4 Pro, because it's really up to the developer how they add enhancements to their games. So some developers may just bump up the resolution to 1080 because the resolution wasn't running 1080 to begin with. Or some developers may run it 1080 but at a higher frame rate. So if you just have a 1080p television, you can still take advantage of the PlayStation 4 Pro, but you really won't get the most out of it until you get a 4K television with HDR. Now, that being said, there are going to be a lot of televisions out there that say they support 4K and HDR, even some from Samsung, which this is. And I guess it's time to just say what's already in the title. This is the KS8000 series Samsung TV. So they make several sizes. They make a 49-inch, a 55-inch, a 60-inch, and a 65-inch. This one behind me is a 65-inch, but the camera's pretty close, so you probably can't even see the edges. In any case, they run from about $900 for the 49-inch all the way up to about $1,500 for the 65-inch. I think the sweet spots are really 55 and 65. If you're concerned about price, get the 55. If you can afford it or you just have the space for it, get a 65. Now, there are other Samsung TVs that are larger, and there are Samsung TVs that are higher grade models. For example, there's a 9000 series, which is a step up from this one, of course, the 8000 series, but it's not as big a step as the one below it, which is the 6000 series, and it makes sense because you go 6000, skip 7, then you go to 8000, then immediately to 9. So there's diminishing returns when you move from the 8000 series to the 9000 series. It does look better, but it's not as good of a jump or as big as a jump as going from the 6000 series to the 8000 series. So I think this is the best value. It gives you very good performance with regard to HDR. It has really good blacks, has really good colors. And if you buy the 6000 series for the Samsung, then you're giving up some colors. It supports HDR. In theory, it'll take the HDR signal. It'll recognize that it's HDR, but then it won't be able to really display all the colors properly or as vibrantly as the 9000 series can, because it just doesn't have the color gamut. And that's why it's cheaper. So you can get a 70-inch 6300, which is in the 6000 series, Samsung, that is cheaper than the 65-inch 8000 series. Now the 65-inch, so the prices are if you want to focus on the 65-inch, the 8000 is about $1,500 and the 9000 is $2,000. So it's about 33% more, and I don't think it's 33% better. So that's why I recommend the 8000. You're not going to be disappointed in the image, but I think if you go to a Best Buy or Fry's or your local electronic shop and you look at an 8000 and a 6300 side by side and they're playing the same content and they're tuned correctly, they're properly adjusted, you will see a significant difference between the 6300 and the 8000, especially when they're playing HDR content. So I would highly recommend that you get the 8000 or the 6300 unless, one, you're super price sensitive because the 6300 is still a good TV, or two, you really, really want a 70-inch and you don't want to spend $5,000 because the largest that they make for the 65-inch, the largest they make for the 8000 series is a 65-inch, and that's the $1,500 one. If you want to go larger, you can go to the 75-inch and the 9000, which costs $5,000 for 10 more inches, or you can get a 70-inch for like $1,400 if you get a 6300. So if you're dead set on like a 70-inch television, then go ahead and go with the 6300. But I think for most people, the 55-inch or the 65-inch KS8000 is going to be great for you. Now, the TV itself has a lot of features that I don't care about. It has a lot of smart TV features. It has built-in apps. It has games. I don't give a crap about that stuff. So if you guys do, you may want to look around and make sure that that it's geared to what you want it to be used for. But for me, I just need a big, dumb, good-looking television that's really fast. And that's another point I should bring up. The input lag, excuse me, The input lag rating on the 8000, actually on all of them, the 6000, 8000, 9000, all the current Samsungs are really, really good. They're really low. So it has about an 18 to 20 millisecond input lag rating, and that means you get between 1 and 2 frames of input lag when you're playing a game. Well, what does that mean to you? Say you're playing Street Fighter 5 and you hit the punch button. When you hit the punch button, if you have a lot of input lag, you hit the punch button, it takes a split second longer for the punch to actually get displayed on the television, because the television processes the image and then displays it. So it feels sluggish. It feels like you're trying to do a combo and you drop it because you're relying on the visual aspect of the game, and it's lagging behind. Or if you're playing Call of Duty or Titanfall or Battlefield and you have somebody in your sights and you hit fire, well, when you hit fire, the person in your sights was actually there a split second ago. So when you hit fire, you miss him, right? So those are times where you're feeling like, hey, it's not me, it's the game. Or it's probably not the game, it's probably your television. If you're playing an older television or a really low quality television, especially a big low quality television, or sometimes even really high-end televisions can be very laggy. You just have to kind of check the rating for that model. And not everybody rates them for input lag, although they should, and most of them are now. But in any case, the input lag is really, really low on this, especially compared to all the other commercial models. It blows them all away, and it looks fantastic, and it's a good price point right now. So that's why I recommend this television. If you have any interest in the Xbox One S, this is also a good TV because, again, the color gamut is very wide and allows you to enjoy those 4K Blu-ray movies, which, again, the PlayStation 4 Pro cannot play. So either for Xbox One S or the PlayStation 4 Pro, I think this is the TV to get. It's at a good price. It's not the cheapest, but please stay away from those bargain basement Elements and higher and TCL sets. If you've got a PlayStation 4 Pro and you're running a 1080p television right now and you're like, oh, I need to get a 4K television to really, you're not going to enjoy it. They're going to be washed out colors. If they support HDR, it won't be a very good, very good HDR support. So I would rather recommend a high-end, cheaper 1080p set than a low-end 4K set, because most of the content's still 1080, and I would rather enjoy it with a really good, solid-looking picture than a higher resolution that looks like garbage. So don't buy a television that costs $350 and is like 60-inch. It's garbage. Unless you don't care. If you don't care, then you're probably not watching this video, right? But yeah, stick to quality stuff. Other recommendations, if you don't like Samsung for whatever reason, Sony, no, not Sony. Well, yeah, Sony does make one. It's like the X Series 93D, I think, 830D or 930D. I don't know. I looked at that for a little bit, but the input lag was too high for me. That's another thing I should mention. When you watch or when you play games in HDR with HDR enabled, some television manufacturers won't allow you to turn game mode on, which is how you get the really low input lag ratings. So if you can't turn game mode on with HDR enabled, you basically either play really sluggish HDR games or you play without HDR. So this one allows you to enable game mode with HDR enabled, and it doesn't really make it any slower. A little maybe a millisecond or two slower than if HDR was not enabled. Also 4K and 1080p content are also all very low input lag, and it varies widely. Like Vizio's, depends which port you use. Not every port can do game mode, I think. Not every port can do HDR. So, and it's just a mess. And so I've done all the work for you. Trust me, KS8000 is the way to go. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section below, or shoot me a tweet at Rob Nava, or look me up on Facebook at the same name. I'm probably going to make another video after this. It'll be a separate video though, for those that want to see the differences with the options turned on and off when I'm playing on this television. All right, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, or tell me you hate it if you hate it. All right, see you next time.